The movie I'm going to talk about this week is called Dead of Night, and it is a anthology film or portmanteau film. Ealing Studios is most famous for its comedies, mostly light comedies, but there's also Kind Heart and Coronets, which is not all that light. This film is directed by 4 different men. Alberto Cavalcanti, Charles Crichton, Basil Dearden, and Robert Hamer. And Robert Hamer was, in fact, the director of Kind Hearts and Coronets. There are 2 things going on in this movie at the same time. You have a series of standalone stories, and then you have a linking narrative. It begins when a man, an architect, played by Mervyn Johns, arrives at a country house. There's a party there, and he seems disturbed quite from the very beginning. He announces to the guests, who are all these sort of upper middle class, very kindly English men and women, that he has been there before, and he makes predictions, seemingly outlandish predictions about what will happen during the evening. And as we find, all of the predictions that he makes come true. The other people at the party are quite taken with this idea of premonition. And so they begin to tell their own stories of supernatural events. And in this, they are opposed, quite genially as it turns out, by a foreign physician, a German psychoanalyst named Dr. Van Straten, played by Frederick Falk. And the first story is called The Hearse Driver. And it is about a man who cheats death because he has a premonition of his own death. And the great British character actor Miles Malleson plays both the hearse driver and the bus conductor. The second story is called The Christmas Party, and a teenage girl at the party, played by Sally Ann Howes, describes a Christmas party that she had been at in a very large house, where she comes across a boy crying in a room, and afterwards she finds out that this boy doesn't exist, or that perhaps he was a boy who had been murdered many years before. The third sequence is called The Haunted Mirror, and it stars a man about to get married. Peter Cortland, played by Ralph Michael, is about to get married to Googie Withers, and she gives him, as a pre-wedding gift, a very handsome antique mirror. And he discovers to his horror that there is a parallel narrative working inside the mirror, that he appears to become a different person, a violent man who becomes obsessed with the idea that his fiancée is being unfaithful to him, and he plans on murdering her. Now, by this time in the movie, it starts to become obvious that these stories told by the guests are not at all random, that they seem to be reaching some sort of conclusion, as we can see when each of the predictions made by the architect guest come true. The fourth sequence is called The Golfing Story, and it is a ghost story, but it's a rather humorous story, originally written by H.G. Wells. There are 2 old duffers, played by Basil Radford and Naughton Wayne, who had this double act that went on for many years and was quite popular in Britain. You can see them in Hitchcock's film The Lady Vanishes, for instance. And these 2 men love golf above all, but then a woman appears, and both of the men fall madly in love with her. But there can only be one man who is victorious, and so, as it turns out, one of them has to die. He comes back as a ghost, and the winner in the love duel discovers, to his horror and to the audience's amusement, that he can't get rid of this ghost. Now, the final sequel is called The Ventriloquist Dummy, and it is distinguished by an astonishing performance by Michael Redgrave, playing a ventriloquist called Maxwell Frere. A visiting American ventriloquist, a rival, as it were, Sylvester Key, played by Hartley Power, checks out Frere's act and is quite impressed by it. He goes backstage and discovers that Redgrave has a very unusual relationship with his dummy, in that the dummy appears to have a will of its own. And going back to this theme of infidelity that we saw earlier, the dummy makes it known that he's come to the conclusion that Maxwell Frere is a stiff, and he'd really like to work with Sylvester Key. Redgrave becomes, well, he goes mad as a result of this, but there's this disturbing suggestion in the movie that he is not, in fact, mad, that the dummy is human in a way. At the end of the ventriloquist dummy sequence, all of the stories come together in a final sequence, which is absolutely terrifying. And Dr. Van Straten, who has been the voice of skepticism, the voice of science, finds that his objections to the supernatural are overridden by the evil which seems to be present in the house. Now, there is a surprise ending, which I won't give away, but anyone who has ever suffered from a peculiar type of nightmare will know what I'm talking about. This is the nightmare where one is facing some enormous evil, and you rouse yourself out of bed. You run and you turn on the light, and then you pant in relief. And then you find out that you are still asleep, and you are in another level of the nightmare. And it is this aspect of the film Dead of Night which makes it, to me, the most frightening film that I have ever seen, because my view is that insanity is the most frightening thing in the world. And viewers of this movie will be drawn into the conceit that reality, the real world, is spinning away from them as they watch it, which is one of the things that makes this such an engrossing experience. Unfortunately, the movie Dead of Night is not available in North America except by import. If you go to Amazon Co. UK, you can find a DVD version of it and the Blu-ray version of it. The Blu-ray is quite good. So if you have a DVD player, this can easily be reprogrammed such that you can watch foreign DVDs. It's outrageous to me that this restraint of trade, this cartel of the movie studios, has been allowed to be created. But in any event, you know, the only option you have if you want to watch this in Blu-ray in North America is to get a so-called all regions Blu-ray player, which will set you back, about $300. Now, if you don't mind watching this on DVD, you can buy a very handsome box set called the Definitive Ealings Studios Collection, which has 16 of the films of that studio, as well as a number of handsome extras, and you can pick that up on Amazon for £43.50.